All right. We will go to a PSA, and I want to thank my authors before we leave. I want to thank Joyce, Alberta, and Pat. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having us,
sharing.
Billy, again.
And check the website out, awb6,6.com. You'll see all four of us there. My name is Willie Wideman-Pleasants, and this is the Willie Web Show. Willie's Web. You're in the web. You're trapped. You can't go anywhere. Sorry. And I got my audience. Give me a hand, audience. Woo! Woo! There you go. Really? Woo! Thank you, Alex. Well, my second segment of my show, I have some great people here. They're probably award-winning, but they didn't tell me that. But I'm going to assume that they are also. So let me introduce them to you so we can get some questions. She is a freelance journalist. Her articles and essays have been published in national newspapers, magazines, and anthologies. She has been a teacher since 2001. She is a co-facilitator of an unusual class called White People Challenging Racism. What Was I Thinking was her first book. What Was I Thinking, reflecting on everyday racism. The other book is What Was I Thinking, digging deeper into everyday racism. She is currently the co-chair of the Boston chapter of the National Writers Union. Barbara Beckwith. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting me.
I'm loving it. A graduate of Windsor School in Boston, she holds a BA from Kenya College and an MBA from Simmons College. She was a general manager of the Boston Dance Umbrella and First Night. Her first book, Waking Up White, tells the story of how she went from a well-meaning to well-doing. She was a classroom teacher in Cambridge for 25 years without understanding racism as a symptomatic issue. And she's also a member of the Writers Union. So let me introduce to you Debby Irving. Did I get that right?
You got it right.
Now the next person sitting on the end, I have no idea who he is. He snuck on my show. But I'm going to let him introduce himself. And if you don't like him, we're going to kick him out. So, Paul, tell us who you are and why you're here.
I got lost and I just found my way into this room. I'm attracted to bright lights. So, no, my name is Paul McElarney, and I'm a film producer and director. We're actually I'm in the middle of making my second feature film. We just finished our first one, and we like to tackle the topic of race as often as possible, and from as many different perspectives as possible, without holding back. I don't have any credentials like these two, but I can list off some other credentials. I do have a BA in sociology from UMass Boston.
My alma mater.
Awesome. It's a good school.
Yes.
And I sell vacuums 9 to 5. I don't know if that counts for anything.
Okay.
And
well, keep somebody's house clean, right?
yes. Many people's houses clean, including mine. But no, and I also I'm a co-host of a podcast called Ignorant Radio, as well as I'm the founder and one of the only two writers, one of two writers of the Boston Independent Film Review, which is we just review independent films in Boston, and I don't know, I'm also the co-founder of a sober home in Brockton, so I don't have many official credentials, but
That's a good list. Yeah. That's a good list.
Keep him.
He's a keeper? All right, the audience say I can keep you.
All right.
All right, let's talk to Barbara. I'm sure the audience has a lot of questions, right? All right. Well, you know what? I'm going to let them ask you a question. Okay. Because I think they got it, right? So who wants to go first?
I have a question. Why does it take so long for you to learn? It seems that I am constantly teaching, and it's tiring. It's tiring. Why does it take so long for white people to learn about white privilege?
You can answer that. Anyone? Anyone want?
Well, see, I'm 76, so I grew up and just wasn't talked about. I grew up in neighborhoods that were Protestant, white, and I didn't know it had been set up that way. I'm not even sure my parents exactly knew. They would talk about going to good schools, and I don't know whether they even discussed what that meant. It meant going to a place where everyone was like you. And so when I went to college, when everything, in the 50s, when everything was very quiet, except in the South where there was real organizing. And then in the 60s came along, and Black Power came along, and I think I became very aware of things, but I didn't seem to understand the systems historically and now, well, historically set up and then perpetrated now by well-meaning people who just don't change things. So I basically wrote in order to share my understanding and get other people. I feel as though that you shouldn't have to be educating people, and that we should educate ourselves and be very aware of the systems and everything going through our heads too, and analyze it and bring it out and not be so darn afraid of talking about it. And you may say something similar.
Yeah, I would say all of that.
Yeah.
And so the conversation in my household was pretty superficial. I mean, we really honestly talked about sports, the weather, the commute, who was going where, who was doing what. It wasn't just racism that wasn't discussed, but in my upper middle class white household, we really didn't talk about any emotions that would stir anybody up, because emotional restraint was considered a sign of being well-raised. And being well-raised, manners were really important. And so so when race, and actually there was a saying in my house, never discuss politics or religion. I think about that now and I think, whoa, think of the implications of that. Because the white supremacist roots of this country are completely entangled in politics and religion. So again, I don't think my parents had anywhere near the kind of analysis that I now have. And so in this vacuum, speaking of vacuums, in this informational vacuum growing up, all I had was media images. And the media images portrayed, black people in the roles of servants, hobos, to use an outdated term, everybody that was not white. There was no range of display. There were these very narrow portrayals. And so I used that as my way to construct these others who, by the way, I never saw, because I was also in a community that was engineered to be white through our complex housing and lending system. So enter the world, and I start to see people of color, and my only meaning was this very distorted one. And so even today, when now that I'm a racial justice educator, I'll put together data, and I always have to say, wait a second, you could look at this data that I'm presenting to show a wealth gap, a health gap, education gaps. You can look at any sector in our country, and there is a gap that is right along a color line, white and everybody else. You could look at that and you could say, oh boy, those white people are achieving better and accumulating more money and healthier because they're genetically superior. If you don't understand what's going on politically, historically, you could have that 180-degree incorrect interpretation of the very same data.
So where were you when you kind of felt that I got it? Where were you, in your life? Were you 20s, 30s?
No, I was 48. And wow. I had the data in terms of the lived experience under my nose every day as a Cambridge public school teacher, which I actually I wasn't for 25 years because I was at Dance Umbrella and First Night. But in every job I ever had, I was always trying because I believed that I could help people of color by reaching out and including, and yet without any analysis, I was enacting this missionary savior energy, which is just completely offensive. It made me feel good about myself, but completely offensive to everybody else.
I think you said it in your book because you wrote about she wrote about teaching one of the kids, and she said she read the paper, and what we talk about, you read the paper, and the paper you graded based on who he was.
Right.
And then you went back years later and you go, I didn't really look at what he was saying, the struggle he was having.
That was actually my first teaching in Berkeley, California, in a junior high school, and a girl wrote, when I was born, my parents were very happy because they were killed in Hiroshima by the atomic bomb.
Wow.
And she had impeccable handwriting, and I said, A+, very good, or something like that. I did not even address this deep. She was sharing something of her life. I now have changed.
But do you think that, I don't want to ask all the questions, anyone else have another question that they...
I have a lot of questions, but... Okay. Debby, right? Debby? How are you changing how you're going to teach now that you know about the data?
Well, so what happened to me was I went to Wheelock College and took a graduate school course called Racial and Cultural Identities, and I was asked to look at my own racial and cultural identity, and my first thought was, oh, this was what happened at age 48. I thought, well, I don't have a race. How can I study my racial identity? So when cut to 6 months later at the end of that course, and I thought, I can't go back to the classroom. I don't feel equipped. I feel like I have so much more to learn. I have to undo like 48 years of misinformation. So I went on a real quest to learn